So I hope people have a desire to start communities. And we need them. We need them a lot. And this is not going to be a talk that you will typically hear about how to identify and diagnose, are you in a cult so that you should leave. It's been done to death. I strongly support that. That's great. I love those talks. This is not that. This is you are starting a group. And how do you avoid a scenario where a couple of years later, who knows how many years later, somebody's going to write a regretful blog post about having lost track of what on earth they were investing in this, like their epistemic norms went out the window, and everybody's going to know it was you. You did that. Yeah. So if you went into that never intending for that outcome to occur, and then the group just kind of took over, like that guy in the office who said that it's never actually the cult leaders, like cult leaders just get all the money, cult members get to have all the fun. Like really they're running the show to a large degree. All right, how do you get out in front of that? Just look at some. Just a working definition. Lots of people have loved to start this talk with questions from the audience about like, let's define, is this a cult? Is that a cult? That, please don't. Like, we're just gonna move past that. For the working definition for our purposes today, a group of unchecked self-reinforcing spirals of group norms that is eventually regretted, loss of sense of self, autonomy, contact with reference points. How can we prevent that general class of thing? And it does not necessarily have to involve, let's say, religion per se. So we're acting a little bit more broadly. There's an entire podcast that's just like comically bringing up a different thing to call. They're just going to call it a cult in every single episode, and they just bring in something like spin cycle or something, and they'll just accuse everything of being a cult. Because there's a certain way you can. Everything has things that are good that then get unchecked. It's not that you can't have these things. So reasonably expecting somebody to have an expertise beyond yours turns into unquestioned obedience. Enthusiastically sharing what's good about the community becomes a recruitment obsession. Every org requires financial support, and then there is a money obsession. Clearing the space of greatly disruptive people, I do that all the time. You have to. But that's on a spectrum with discouraging all dissent. The fact that every group has some collective point of view is good. Justifying everything is bad. Having some cultural norms versus behavioral mandates. There's a naturally rising status and influence affecting any group that you can't completely prevent. But it can get to the point of completely out of control spiraling status games. And then let's talk about accountability. Like if there's no accountability, well, Ari Nielsen has explained that sometimes it's just a tax on activities, and it's not always worth the time and energy to go into making sure that absolutely every single thing you do is as accountable as possible. And that's okay. Guilt and shame based versus it's perfectly fine to have some regret for letting down one's peers. And well, here's the bottom line. You can't have a group at all unless there is an in-group of some kind and an out-group of some kind, and it's good for it to be porous. But if there's no difference between your group and not being in your group, people will not be in it at all. There's always some reason why they're there as opposed to not wanting to show up to it. And when all definitions just dissolve, then they were already in it before because it's everybody. Okay, so JD Wheel is involved with the Flow Genome Project, and they came out with an ethical cult checklist. You can look that up on an awesome PDF that they gave you. There's some risk factors. Basically, they said, why don't we come up with sort of a better business bureau? That's what the world needs. The world needs some way to rate and rank various groups for incremental levels of this kind of spectrum. And, well, we really need to ding that movement's credit score, or that group's credit score, because of the stuff that's been happening. The equivalent of a credit score, shall we say. Think of it like a meta sangha, instead of like there's a bunch of sanghas, and then over them there's like a meta sangha. That would be a really good thing. Sangha? Never mind, Buddhist church, forget about that.
I just didn't know what that was.
Okay, so we've got, they mentioned ecstasis, catharsis, and communitas. If you've got emotional highs, emotional lows, and community, you're at a higher risk where you really need to be on the lookout for the kind of dynamics that we're going to be talking about in this talk. I absolutely love my local regional burn. It's got these out the wazoo, and it's really well managed. It can be managed what you want is more emotional highs, emotional lows, and community, then this is the top for you. You've just got to figure out how to take all the things we just looked at and like, it's not just go directly to people and say, hey, stop doing this. But we'll talk about the social norms and group dynamics that cause them to want to go towards the right regardless of what you as a leader actually do, moral force. And so the ethical cult checklist has grabbing the one ring of power, the mythologized origin story of the founder, absolutist claims of attainment, ritualized separation, creating in and out groups with messianic purpose, specialized language, a break with all past precedents, weaponizing peak experience and healing, tightly controlled and scripted access, emphasizing feeling over thinking. Now that's the one that gets all the attention. Key decisions and commitments are encouraged or forced while in non-ordinary states. Like all pretty bad warning signs. And these are the things that their group would sort of give a credit score ding or rise to if they had such a thing as an overarching thing that could rate and judge various groups. Okay, you don't just have to pick the right thing. If only I could pick the right thing and it is about that, then all my problems are solved. Famously, the guy who ran Skeptics magazine talked about how Ayn Rand started what the essay was titled The Unlikeliest Cult in the World. And it's precisely any time that you were involved in something, you know, we're immune to this. That's probably the exact thing you actually need to be watching out for, because you're not going to be on your guard about it at all. Just because something can be done badly doesn't mean it isn't good. The corollary, just because something is good doesn't mean it can't be done badly. So if you think, you know what, I've seen these people do these terrible things in the name of such and such a movement, therefore it is bad. It's actually probably false. And if, man, everything I read about such and such a movement is just glowing, so I'm going to start a group, and because it's always worked out for all these other people, it's going to be great. Not necessarily. Anything that can be done well can be done badly. So this is abstract of any particular thing that your group is about. Now here's the poison pill that will really, really get you. And look into the stifling air of rigid radicalism on joyfulmilitancy.com, which describes this in intense detail. You would tolerate this if only you were a good enough member of our group, an exemplar of what we are trying to accomplish, what we stand for, if only you did enough philanthropy. If only you were a good enough therapeutic healer. If only you were rational enough. If only you were Christian enough. It doesn't matter what it is. Again, all these things can be done well or they can be done poorly. And now this is what sets in terms of social pressure of everybody in the group looking at everybody else in the group and being like, well, I need to be what this group is telling me to be. And then where do you actually stop? Well, you don't. That's the answer. You don't stop, and then it gets out of hand. So you create, and you have to constantly put on a display of whatever that such and such is. It turns into Goodharting it, like Goodhart's law, that whatever you measure ceases to become a good measure because people are gaming the system to try to be really good at that proxy. The proxy will constantly kick in. And it creates an atmosphere of shame, anxiety, mistrust, competition, and perfectionism. You might ask, well, what's the opposite of that? David Chapman calls it wonderment, curiosity, humor, play, enjoyment, and creation. I think wonderment, humor, curiosity, play, enjoyment, and creation are a pretty good thing that's difficult to Goodhart. So for Fluidity Forum in Detroit, we actually made that like right up there. We're going to say, bring us your philanthropy and your trauma healing and your new spirituality and your rationalism and all these, bring us all these things. We will help you do that in a good-natured way. If it's okay for all, we will allow you to be reverent, good-naturedly about that. If we can be irreverent toward it, good-natured. So we're not going to enshrine your cause area or whatever your one thing is as the goal of our organization, and it gets good-hearted. Because it's really tough to good-heart wonderment, curiosity, humor, play, enjoyment, creation. That's at the root of it. Now, I'm not saying build every organization on that, but be on the lookout for it. Many organizations do, in fact, have to have a very, very targeted mission, and should. And that's when you're at somewhat of a risk of good-hearting through this. You would tolerate how we are treating you if only you were a good enough social justice warrior, if only you were a good enough anti-racist, if only you were a good enough Soviet communist. We've seen this play out in there is no good or bad that you just pick the right ideology. Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do it, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So what have you lost touch with when you find that the group is going towards this area? It's losing touch with what's actually alive and getting into good-hearted company. The wow factor. Okay, in forming the group, you're looking into what are our, let's say, the 10 principles of Berkeley, or we're going to have a mission statement, or we're going to have this list. You post the list right prominently in the about page on the website. Okay, and as you watch the social environment evolve and you're bringing people in, is there a wow factor? And the wow factor could be both good or bad. The wow factor could be, wow, this is an amazing spiritual insight. It makes me feel so good. It's so big. It's so encompassing. Or it could be, wow, everybody in the entire world is going to die from artificial intelligence unless I personally solve it. And if I don't personally solve it, I am responsible. Wow! And the wow is really negative. Now notice, I'm not saying that the AI is not going to kill humans, because this is independent of that. My favorite Less Wrong post is by Michael Valentine. Here's the exit, in which he said, have you thought about the AI in here that's expanding to completely consume all possible resources until you're an absolute mess and there's absolutely nothing you can do about the external AI? Work on this. So all the people in the group, when we form a group full of emotional highs, emotional lows, community, and then there is this social pressure they're placing on each other to be exemplars of it, work on that thing that's going to colonize your entire brain with paperclips forever. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to be good at the mission that your organization is about. And pretty soon people are making themselves crazy. The wow factor. It's a risk factor. Staying grounded. Okay, so maintain ties to other social scenes and circles. Encourage that in people. Just watch as your, whatever it is, a group house, an authentic relating circle group, whatever it is. Are people maintaining ties? You know what, I'm also in this thing, and I'm also part of this thing, and I know people from this, and I know people from that. Maintain outside perspectives, and encourage that as, if you can build that into the group, that's great. Like, something like, please don't get 100% of everything here. Stay close to some people with low openness to experience high normativity. In science fiction fandom, I ran science fiction conventions for decades, and we had what I now realize was sort of the self-ghettoization in this concept of the mundanes. Maybe you didn't fill the hotel and there's some people in some hotel rooms on the elevator with you who are like, what's that costume? And we're like, we're better than the mundanes. Then they started calling them muggles. And it's not productive. It's actually really not productive. So I deliberately cultivate a lot of relationships and encourage all the people in groups that I run to continue to have some kind of relevance checkpoint. We've got in the rationalist community the phrase, the train to crazy town. How do you not get on the train to crazy town? Especially how do you get off the train to crazy town? By your normies. You go to them and you're like, I'm talking about all these things. I'm like, that's fucking weird. And all of a sudden it just kind of kicks you out and you're like, oh yeah, actually, it is fucking weird. Like, I still like it. But now there's a bit of a broadened perspective. Keep normies around. So low openness to experience, high normativity. You don't have to be in the group, but like, make sure you're like, if it's reasonable and possible and they're not treating you terribly, if they're treating you terribly, find some other very normal people and just cultivate constantly, ask them not to lunch or dinner, and then tell them all this weird shit. Info hazards. Info hazards are a very interesting topic, and so info hazards are frequently discussed in the rationalist community, and I want to talk about info fragility. Because it's not the cult, like, yes, I am deeply concerned about predatory people, and you've got to manage that. But usually it's the info fragility. Info fragility is all of my meaning and purpose is wrapped up in this thing. And David Chapman, he was going to be here. He had a travel snafu, but like this is really grounded in meaningless.com by David Chapman, which I narrated on my audiobook, Fluidity Audiobooks. How to relate to meaning in your life so that it's not what he calls an eternalism. In an eternalism, you're waffling back and forth between nihilism, nothing means anything, and eternalism. This one thing means everything. Oh, that's shit, I hate it. Nihilism. Oh no, I'm depressed. Back to a different thing. I am obsessively infatuated with this now. And so with a tendency to get 100% of your meaning from things, a predatory person can use that against them. I'm actually more concerned these days in running groups about cultivating the group as to be on the lookout for the attendees' info fragility. If I have created a room full of info fragile, one info hazard guy comes in there and makes wreckage. But even if they don't, all the people who's like, here's my fragility is, I desperately need this to be the thing, guys. Can we please all agree that this is, yes, I agree with you even harder. Because my fragility is the thing needs to be the thing. This is my one purpose in life, my eternalism, or whatever it is. This is the spiral that gets out of control of them mutually enforcing on each other without a predator even present.
I apologize that I think it was too abstract for me to understand. Could you give an example?
Okay. So somebody says that the, okay. There was, I'm tempted to tell you to, I will, but I'm tempted to tell you to look up the version of this talk I gave previously on YouTube where I named a lot of fucking names. But there was a group house, in which the person who posted to medium.com said that they had been living there with all of these various goals to develop psychotechnologies. And that this person, by her own admission, was so invested in like, this is my purpose in life. If I get kicked out of this group, I have no purpose in life. Are you with me so far? Yeah. All right. And then they were like, well, you want to be a good enough. Remember the good enough? You want to be good enough at our saving the world, right? And then they escalated the story. It's about saving the entire world. Delusions of grandeur kick in. They're like, well, you should be doing all this debugging. Why don't you do some more debugging with us? And she's like, okay. And then the other members of the group were all saying, this is so important, it is my only purpose in life. If I lose this, I have nothing, I am nothing. I become suicidal. With me so far. You've got very info-fragile people.
Are we talking to Zizians?
No.
Okay.
Oh God, the Zizians are just the latest one. No, we're talking about leverage consulting.
Okay.
Thank you for making me say their name in Berkeley, California.
I would have said it for it.
Yeah. It's leverage. So pretty soon you ended up with a group of economics and statistics rationalists, all of whom I would be happy to get to know, and who are basically my people. And what grieved me about that was like they're believing in literal fucking peanuts. Epistemic norms go out the window because of the pressure, the mutual pressure. If this isn't the thing, then we have nothing. So Tyler Alterman did a wonderful thread about how so many modalities and so many different things you can believe in, therapies and spiritualities and so forth, if you, or let's say Myers-Briggs, or some kind of astrology, or some kind of framework that you could apply, if you look for it, you will find it. You will always find it. The brain will generate it like procedurally generated levels in a board game. So now all the people in the group are like, they've got this great modality, and yes, it's good. Let's say it's therapy modality. Let's just use the therapy modality as one example. And they're like, wow, this is working great. Guess why it's working great? Because all the people around you are like, this is it. If I don't come up with this therapy modality, I'm going to be depressed. And so now they're all enforcing it on each other. Next thing you know, the brain generates it on demand. You're looking for demons. You're looking for internal family systems, which is good. I advocate for internal family systems. It's great. But now, whatever that therapy modality is, you're like, it has to be this. So the group all starts performing it, and their own brains start performing it to them. This is the spiral of info fragility, it is a predatory group with no predators. It doesn't need them, because everybody needs. I grew up in fundamentalist Christianity. Everybody needed the rapture and the apocalypse to occur, and talk about it all the time. And they needed Jesus to be speaking to us in our hearts all the time. So they said that he was, because the brain just generated Jesus. So if they didn't have that eternalism, they had no. Is this clear?
More so, I think that I'm getting hung up on the word info hazards. Maybe the only example which I know is the famous baskets. And I'm trying to see info fragility as the opposite.
An info hazard is a person in this context. I'm referring to people from the rationalist community who have been referred to as a person who is an info hazard.
Okay,
And people in the rationalist community who I know personally, or used to. And who, when they are around somebody, all of a sudden reality starts to warp because they surround themselves with info-fragile people and they know what buttons to push. So what I'm trying to say is, don't have the fucking buttons.
Do you think people who come from Mormonism, evangelicals, are info-fragile in particular?
That's why they're there.
Well, I mean,
when a
like
group is-
your upbringing, you know, like, do you think that made you info-fragile?
No. Because I was born into a second generation. My parents were first generation. That's what you find.
Okay.
You know, the joiners. The joiners are the ones, and then that entire group had what Eliezer Yudkowsky is referred to as evaporative cooling, in which if you aren't sufficiently committed, eventually whoop, you're zoomed out of the cycle, and next thing you know, the group only has the most hardcore in it that are remaining. Evaporative cooling is another interesting dynamic of cult formation, or like cultic pattern formation. So one of the patterns you'll get into is decoherence. This is not all, it's just one of the styles, and I'll talk about some others as well. And in decoherence, everybody enthusiastically supports everything that everyone says, no matter how incoherent. I really enjoyed the Stoa, which was an online salon, and I wish it was still around. I basically created a fluidity forum to be like, what if we had the Stoa in person? But one of the things I started to notice was that, wow, you are so right about everything. How are you so right about everything all the time? And Mayani, why are you so right about everything? It's amazing how right you are about everything all the time, and everything you say is so wise, and I feel, see, this is a good impulse. It's a pro-social impulse. You really want to encourage people, don't you? Everybody there wants to encourage everybody. And the speaker they would have on in the next session the next week would say something completely opposite, and everyone would rave about how wise it is. So this is decohering into basically not having anything in particular that you believe, based on a poor epistemic hygiene that is based on a admirable desire to encourage everybody and not be like, well, you know what do you think about that though? Isn't that kind of bullshit? And that never happens. The epistemic hygiene just turns to mush. The surrounding environment just absorbs the group because there isn't anything in particular that you are. It's just like, yeah. Vibe collapse is a different one than decoherence. Now in vibe collapse, let's say we got a couple of vibes here, and I'll describe this. One vibe sees another vibe as omnipresent in their life and must be escaped from. The left brain is seen as a threat. Normal relating isn't relating enough. Only my special authentic relating is relating enough. It's the only kind of relating that is good enough. And the other one is the right brain is seen as a threat. Normal rationality isn't rational enough. Only a special kind counts. So I had a person I had an idea for Fluidity Forum. She was super stoked about helping me run it, and then I said there would be slide presentations as one of the things, in addition to therapy modalities and yoga and all the things that she was excited about. And the minute I said slide presentations, she was like, nope, don't want anything to do with it, don't want to be around it, don't want to be there because the left brain is omnipresent in my life. And I'm just tired of being suppressed by it all the time. And I've had other people who be like, you guys are a bunch of gooey hippies, and like I don't want all these modalities or whatever. You know, I'm a hard-nosed person, and so I don't want anything to do with this. Again, fleeing from what they see as omnipresent in their life, which is there's this endless goo of woo and superstition. And so if that norm takes hold in the group, pretty soon everybody else leaves. Next thing you know, everybody in the group has to be a particular way. And this isn't just about content, it really is more about the vibes of how you are, which it's amazing how much it has to do with just jargon. Just the jargon that the shared group uses, and when they're not using that jargon, then all of a sudden people are filtered out because they just don't feel like they belong, because people feel like they belong by sometimes. So watch the vibes so that you don't lose all the diversity of vibes and collapse into only one vibe, which will then promote a kind of conformist mindset. Okay. What time is it? What time is it? 4. Okay, good. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. I'm getting on this quickly. Antiquity, legacy, transmission, and legitimacy. Sometimes a cult is legitimation on overdrive. So watch out for the use of things from the past. Now, things from the past are great. There's so much that we can learn from them, but everything has to be justified by this is what they said 300, 400, 1,000 years ago. And I've known so many groups, especially within neo-paganism, I hate to just like pick on specific people. They're like, oh yes, this is completely authentic. I'm like, no. Data Chapman calls this invented futures and fake history. So fake history is when you're making up something that was actually ancient, that you in fact actually made up and it is new. But you're claiming that this is something that you know about from like your Celtic ancestors from hundreds of years ago, and they're what they passed down to you. And you'll contradict whatever other guru says something else. The opposite is invented traditions. The opposite of invented traditions is the fake futures, which is, wow, this is unbelievably exotic and exciting and new and innovative, and no, it's not. It's been tried and failed a million times, but you want to make it seem sexy, it's the juice of the futures. So these are forms of legitimation. You legitimate things by saying it's been tried, or you legitimate things by saying we are the ones who are innovating. And so if legitimacy kicks off in a cycle that it just goes into overdrive, the whole group can become so fixated on justifying everything that way that they're not paying attention to the big picture of how you justify things. Epistemic norms can go pretty bad. Now that having said, you know, again, those are not inherently bad things. This is in fact still a spectrum. We might actually have time for the three-part Moten Bailey, so I'm just going to go ahead and add it to the talk. So you're familiar with Moten Bailey, I hope. I'll just review it. So there's the desirable, this is a metaphor for a conversational gambit. There's a very desirable farmland, and it's very poorly defended, and if you get attacked, you can just flee into the highly protected but cold, damp, and uncomfortable fort, which is and in conversation, this comes out like, Santa literally exists at the North Pole. That's the thing you really want to believe. That's what the juice is. You've got to say something controversial and big and important and debatable. And that's the actual goal and the target. And somebody says, no, he doesn't. And then you're like, well, yes, Virginia, Santa exists in our heart. That's the moat. Santa now only exists in your hearts. And so as soon as the attackers go away, you go right back onto your bullshit. This is the Moten Bailey back and forth. Okay, so the three-part Moten Bailey and community works like this. Person A, Santa literally exists at the North Pole. Now person B says, Santa doesn't exist, we looked at the North Pole. Later, person B says again, Santa doesn't exist. Person C says, don't say that, Santa exists in our hearts, as any sophisticated person understands. Why are you so mean? And later, now this is person C came in, because person A already gave up here. Person C has to say, well, you know what, we have a more sophisticated definition of God. Excuse me, Santa. And person A, we are a group of people who believe Santa exists at the literal North Pole, not just in our hearts, and it is unsophisticated and confrontational if we deny it. This now causes the group norm to set in against denying the existence of Santa, because you don't want to be unsophisticated and you don't want to be confrontational. So, just point out this cycle. It's usually going to be a three-part, because it's not going to be this person. They're going to team up with that person, the sophisticated person. We have a new definition of this. Anyway, I thought I would mention this dynamic as well, but we have time for any comments, or frankly, you know, as long as it's not too long, experiences that you feel are relevant to patterns that form within a group. Have you formed a group in which you had a list of principles, or you had some processes or procedures that then checked against these patterns, cultic patterns, or do you have any questions? Yes?
In the spirit of reversing advice, have you ever worked with groups that are not culty enough?
Not for long. Not for long. Not being culty enough is this problem. You don't have any of the stuff on the left. And that's how you can know the group isn't culty enough. Then you should juice it up. Juice it up. And this is like, and I'll get to you in a second, but this is like the Waluigi talk. in which, you know, you've heard it, there's an AI, there's a human who's Mario, and then there's an AI, a good AI who's Luigi. But then there's an evil Mario, which is Wario. And you're like, that's what an evil human would do. I'm going to train my AI to not do any of those things. The Luigi version of Wario is Waluigi, and you're secretly training the AI in everything that it should do to be evil. In order to know to not be that guy, it builds a model of a Waluigi inside itself. Like, how do I be evil? I'll make a model inside myself that is as evil as possible, and then not be that. There's huge risks to this. So I'm kind of Waluigi in cults right now, by telling you exactly how to do it, and like, I couldn't stop you. One of the things I want to emphasize is that you cannot control this. You cannot have perfect understanding, certainty, and control, which is a big part of why cults are run about what they believe. It's usually about, how do I get perfect understanding, perfect certainty, perfect control? That's what David Chapman calls eternalism. Now, if you're like, how can I get perfect understanding, certainty, and control about how to not start a cult? You can't. I'm very sorry. Like, you're not the only person who can control that process. So just understand that everything is risk. Life is risk. Decrease risk, or decrease, like, get better at danger, instead of, like, decreasing risk. Is that?
Yeah.
I think you would.
I'm getting the impression that laughter is a good sign you're not in a cult. Am I understanding it correctly?
Maybe. Do you have to? Yep. Do you have to laugh? See, there you go. See, it's working. Yes.
So maybe this would be a bit too controversial, but I would be interested in, like, if we were to take rationalism as an example, if you were to track it from all the way back in like the SL4 days to like today, where do you think the peak of like info fragility was, and where do you think the peak of like actual cultiness was?
A really big inflection point was, I like Arnold. He's a friend.
So do I, yeah.
Like, he's a friend. Once the narrative became, a few years ago, this is absolutely doomed. The narrative that supports people with what, like this problem that Michael Valentine wrote about, how here's the exit. Like, people were, there was something that was letting people be done. It was okay to stop. So that's what I'm talking about. In a cult, it can't be okay to stop. Anything that's non-cultic, it must be okay to be like, there is a finishing point at which we have now, like, it's okay for you to just live your life now. As opposed to some goal that keeps advancing into the future to become more and more impossible, which means you are now more and more on the hook. And something about the way Eliezer changed the narrative to make it more hooking, you will never be done. And so it combines what I call like, we have a principle at Fluidity Forum. Those who combine the urgency of righteousness with the futility of hopelessness will not be invited back. It was combining the urgency of righteousness, and I'm not even debating with the urgency of righteousness, because it could be. Combining the urgency of righteousness with the futility of hopelessness to keep everyone in the group on the hook forever. Will you ever create a world that has no more racism in it, for example? So you have to be like, yes, we're going to be anti-racist, we're going to help, it's going to make things better, and then you can go home. You can kick back on a beach with a Mai Tai occasionally. You know, like, is there any way that you could ever be done? And somehow that was the narrative inflection that I've been focusing on for the past few years, combining the urgency of righteousness with the futility of hopelessness.
If I can ask again, that's interesting, because I could see it as if you're saying the point where Yudkowsky gave up and said we should die with dignity. That's the point where, oh, well, now I can quit, I can go home, I can, you know, is that like now we're no longer a cult?
And maybe they did, and I just wasn't paying enough attention.
Okay, so you,
Maybe they did, and I just wasn't paying enough attention. But like the
So you would put the peak after that.
the editorial about how we have to have missile strikes on data centers was
okay.
like I'm just watching a narrative evolve.
I can see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the peak was before that, when there were a lot of people in this town, in Berkeley, who I just kept hearing about. That people would come visit me. I live in Detroit. You know, I'm not directly on the ground here. But I just know a lot of people in the scene, and maybe like somebody killed themselves. Somebody was constantly having these mentally ill nightmare life. And Michael Valentine had to write that essay, and I wish he'd written it before.
Right.
So, I mean, you tell me, if you think there was a time that was like peak overinvestment of like everything in my life has to be about solving this or we all die.
I feel almost weird saying this, but I felt like that from like 2005 to like 2018, and then Yudkowsky told me that my effort didn't matter. So
Good.
now I feel like I can go do whatever I want.
Fantastic, fantastic. Maybe I misjudged the vibe shift.
I probably did. I don't know
Yeah.
how that goes.
Let's just,
Yeah, that's right.
regardless of which one, let's just live our lives, come alive. Come alive. Okay, if you have something that is going to need everything, all hands on deck, 100% of the time, forever, first off, be suspicious of that narrative, even if maybe it's true. Question the thing in your head, like Michael Valentine said, and here's the exit, that needs very badly for it to be true. And kick back. Live life. Is your life worth living? If not, how are you even achieving that goal?
That's fair.
Who's next?
I don't know. I felt like the infrafragile concept. I have some sense of how I would look at people who were. I have no sense at all of how I would fix that problem. Unless I'm.
Oh, you mean like how to change them?
Yeah. Unless the solution is to kick people out.
My solution is screening.
Okay.
I can't change them, although I have had some success. So even in the process of invitations to the Validity Forum, you have to apply. That's why we don't get as many people as this does. You literally have to fill out an application form. And one of the things we don't explicitly say in the application form, but the team just reviews that application for signs of, we desperately need help. I desperately need this to be the thing. And like, we're screening for fragility in the application. What's your life about? Are you enjoying it? Those kind of questions, you know? That's in the application. What's your life about? Are you happy? We don't directly say, are you happy? The relationship between the self and their own self and their relationship to the world. So if that person has a clearly unhealthy relationship to their self and to their world, and like I've declined them through email, and then they asked me why, and I told them. And then we had some actually pretty awesome email conversations. I'm like, last time I gave this talk, somebody was like, what is the right percentage of infrafragile people in a group? I don't think that there's a like Bayesian number you can put on that. And sometimes putting numbers on things is fake. But like 2, if I had to pick out of, let's say, a dozen, you know, and then you reach a critical mass past that point. So it doesn't have to be this aggressive filter. But if it's really, really obvious, then that's when you start, there's only so many that the group can sustain before they start to apply that pressure on each other. This is hilarious, because in my last time I gave this talk, I called it a ménage à trois, but what I meant was a folie à deux, and I had to edit the video. I'm just going to put it in this one as well, just to make something myself. It's folie à deux. The folly of more than one people, more than one person. I strongly suspect the 12 disciples were running a game on Jesus, where there's more than one person involved, and it is the madness of multiple people. There is neither the deceiver nor the deceived. This person's the deceiver, that person's the deceived. Instead, everybody, through their pressure on each other for their life purpose, is constantly sending the message to, hey, I'm deceiving myself, you please deceive yourself too. At some level, probably not consciously, they don't actually want to care, and it is unpopular to care about whether what the group says is true. This is a folie à deux. The madness of crowds. Any other questions? Or thoughts? Observations? Knock-knock jokes? Pass me cookies? Yes?
What do you think is the root cause in an individual being infrafragile? I guess, do you think it's a root cause, or is it like you just said, people interact with? I felt my intuition is that it would start off being someone's unhappy and wants to rest everything on like some particular thing, because they don't generally feel good about their life, so they're like struggling to find something that makes them feel good, and so they want to throw it all into one big project, save the world from AI or whatever.
Cognitive
and
complexity.
they run to find people who feel the same way because they
Yeah.
feel like kind of alienated from normal people who like generally feel joy about different things in their life.
Right. The ability, cognitive complexity. I'm not Keegan pilled, but like Robert Keegan's stages of adult development are not like the gospel, but various developmental theories have a lot to say about this, like cognitive complexity, and it's the ability to handle nebulosity. So as you gradually develop the ability to handle nebulosity, meanings can be nebulous, which they inevitably are, which is why David apologized to me that he couldn't be here through a text a little while ago. Read meaningless.com. The exact answer to the question, how does this start? This starts through the inability to handle meanings not being fixed. So if they're not fixed, they're non-existent. I either have, it's this or nothing. I either have Jesus is all, and like I grew up, for example, in an environment in which the King James Version of the English Bible was infallible. It's this or nothing, and if it's not, I watched the flip-flop into nihilism anytime doubt came. And the need to pursue, meanings weren't fixed, definite, perfect certainty, perfect understanding, perfect control. Couldn't handle the ways that in meanings are inevitably different from that. They are like a cloud. They're real, just like a rainbow is real. But two different people looking at a rainbow from two different directions, as Chapman said, will see it in two different locations in the sky. There's lots of different nebulosities about rainbows and clouds. Meanings are like that, and if you can't handle that, then my pastor in the 90s set a Bible on his desk in his office. This is the English King James specific translation of the Bible. Is this God's word? And at the time, because I was still, in the process of secularizing, I was like, the Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic is God's word, and that's a translation of it. He's like, we have nothing else to talk about. And I left. So it is all about the inability to handle a meaning not being fixed. So both eternalists and nihilists agree that meanings must be perfect. And if they're not perfect, they're non-existent. So when you see that, as people go through their lives, gradually developing the ability to handle nebulosity, you want the people with that ability to see meaning, even though it's nebulous, in your group. And you want to have a high enough percentage or proportion of them. So that's the root of it. Ask David Chapman, he's probably going to get here in a couple hours. Or listen to my podcast. Fluidity audiobooks have been every work of David Chapman as a free audio. Yes?
I'd like to hear the story of the most productive and healthy group like this.
Most productive and healthy group like... you mean a most productive and healthy group that does the right side of the chart? Sure. What pushes it the farthest? Probably... I'm really, really into Burns. I love Burning Man. I love regional Burns. I watch this all the time because there is no screening because of the principle of radical inclusivity. We're riding that ragged edge, man. It is a roller coaster trip. And there's something about the constant struggle with eternalism that you'll see. Everything has to be this particular meaning. Oh, my Kundalini flow awakening of art cars and yeah, no, that is awesome and cool, but it's not life. I love the 10 principles, and I'm constantly telling people I love them. No, actually. Other places in my life don't all have to convert. They don't all have to fucking convert. Stop proselytizing. So if I had to pick one thing, it might be that. I'd probably pick, if I gave it more thought, come up with a better answer. But I'm not into a lot of them. In other areas. Like there are entire social scenes that I've probably never even met or encountered that would be better than science. Startups. Yeah, startups. Don't get me started on employment and workplaces. And I put this in my profile because there is a lack of, there's a decline over decades of jobs where you could just go in and do a job and then clock out, and you were really good at it, and you did a good job, and then you could go home. And now it's more like everybody's a YouTube influencer, building their brands in every corporation I've worked in. The place I work, I did a temp job a couple of months ago, and every meeting ends with a shoe clap. Every conference room is sports themed. Everything is about rah-rah, and I'm in meetings where I'm looking around myself like, it's a productive company. It's a productive company. It's a good company. And I'm looking around in these meetings where everybody's giving everyone else kudos, and I'm like, does anyone in this room even believe this? Who are we performing this for? I'm honestly not sure. I don't know who we're performing. Who are the true believers in this room? And the fact that they can keep that illegible, and I don't know who the true believers are, means nobody can just walk into the middle of the room like the Emperor's New Clothes and be like, why are we doing? Why are we putting on this show of our brands? So anyway. You got me onto like a completely unrelated tangent, but that's probably the most productive cult I've ever been.
This may be another version of the question that a few of us have asked. What groups would you say ought to become more cultish?
Well, isn't there this big reputation of effective altruism constantly doing the tax on activities that's not always worth the time and energy to have accountability? Which is weird. Like, it's weird that I would say that. Because, like, in effective altruism, something I also support, like, I am good-naturedly irreverent about effective altruism, and I want them to come to me with good-natured reverence for it, and I'll be like, yes, I'm on board with your cause area. Don't sign me up. Like, I want to spray meaning be gone. Like, I paid for water in the lower Sudan or whatever, but I don't want it all over me. Purpose and meaning doesn't need to, like, get all over me. Eventually, I'll throw it in the laundry machine. But like good-natured irreverence, if that makes sense. And I think for them to be like, you know what, we don't need to constantly like tear ourselves to bits with accountability anymore. Could probably be mentally and psychologically helpful. Come alive. That's my cause area. Find out what the world needs to come alive.
Can you clarify that tax on activity spectrum for me? I don't quite understand.
Okay, accountability. When you're constantly holding everybody in the thing accountable for everything, you have to measure it. We've got to be accountable. So this is an example. Like, there's a famous reputation for self-doubt among the effective altruists. They're like, how can we critique ourselves? Let's critique ourselves harder. Let's critique ourselves in our movement even harder. And Scott Alexander has written blog posts about how it's kind of masochistic. After a point, admirable. We want to encourage it. Please don't, like, completely stop. But that's kind of a time that you could better spend doing the actual cause area, therefore a tax on that. So it's a matter of proportion, and it's on a spectrum. All right, well,
there was a question there. There was a question from...
Was there another question?
Yeah, you had a hand raised, right?
I was just going to make a comment related to the kind of companies, like small startups turning into cults, which is kind of something you want, right? Because you have this idea that you think you're going to bring to the world, and it has to naturally be a cult like that because you really believe in this idea. But then, it turns into like, we're actually like a family, and we all need to be putting in like, 996, and we need to like devote our life into building this like web app to make B2B SaaS in the whatever sector, do whatever. Secret.
Yeah, and again, I can't dispute that. I can't have qualms. I mean, a lot of them have been happy that they did that. They don't have necessarily the regretful blog post on Medium.com about how they lost their sense of self, their common sense. Sometimes they do, though. So it's a spectrum. All right. I don't mind giving some time for the next talk that I'm to set up. I'm very excited about.
Oh yeah, Matt.
Yes.
Tell everyone about your panel tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. So me and Alexis are gonna do a panel tomorrow because we came here with like a whole, how many fluidity forum people are here? 9?
Must be, yeah.
And we're gonna talk about how to start a kind of thing that's like this, a Blogosphere Festival or whatever you want to call it, in your local hometown. Tips and tricks, venue, how to get the word out, and so forth. So it'll be a panel discussion. I really want all of you to go out and start things that are almost but not quite cults. And I hope that today I have encouraged all of you in your ability to do that, because the world desperately needs more connection and less of people are like all alone in a McMansion at the end of a cul-de-sac with like, I don't have any people. I have nobody. This is what the world needs. So do it. Go ahead and allow the uncertainty. Risk becoming an accidental cult leader. That is my admonition to you. To risk it and just get better at it. Get better at it. All right. Well, thanks very much for attending this talk.